They say when you wear Black Power Media gear, you can accomplish anything. You play any and every position. From coaching, to kicking, to receiving, to running and juking. And, oh my goodness, let's see that again in slow motion. Get off me. And you're going to have a lot of haters coming at you, but what you got to do is you got to shake them off, and get to your goal and accomplish it. And when that's done, it's a beautiful thing. I'm talking about going hard, extra, for that extra point. And when it's done beautifully, you talking about touchdown. Oh, and the crowd goes wild and they're celebrating with you and everything. Man, let's see that again. Nice.
Black Power Media, baby. That's how we do it.
Now go to blackpowermedia.org and get you some of that gear. Empower yourself today.
Greetings, one and all. Welcome to another edition of Guerrilla Intellectuals University. I am Jared Ball, joined currently by Dr. Joy James. Kalanji Jama-changa is on his way. Please like, share, subscribe, join the platform, support in any way that you can find to do so that is comfortable for you, and let folks know that you're here and come on in. Dr. James, how are you this morning? Greetings to you.
Yeah, well, you can't see me, but anyway.
That's all right.
You can hear me. I'm doing really well, and it's great to see you. How are you doing, Jared?
I am as good as could be expected, fresh off of a Summer Institute of American Association of University Professors, which at some point I would be very interested in discussing with you, as it was a different form of political organization, but I won't lie and say that it was uninspiring. So it is, for me, very exciting and something that is, especially in context of what we're talking about today, insufficient politically, but it was nice to be around some politically organizing folks trying to do something. So I can't front on that. But anyway.
No, I think that's interesting because I caught one of your shows, and I believe you were also talking about unions, right, and organizing. Mm-hmm. And so in the context of the literature that it's, biography, politics, heartfelt, gritty analyses, it'll be interesting to see to what extent the academy and other zones of formal education, which are not always the best forms of education, are receptive to the kind of critical rigor that George Jackson puts on the table.
Yes. So a couple of things to that point real quick, and then I know there was something you wanted to share with us, and I'm happy for you to do that. But as a quick segue, one, I did not know this, but the AAUP formally merged with the American Federation of Teachers. So being in the AAUP now officially makes me and others as part of a broader union, even if in the state of Maryland I can't unionize and collectively bargain. So that's interesting. But already I ran into Dr. Andrew Douglas, who was one of the presenters who teaches at Morehouse and was the co-author of Prophet of Discontent about Dr. King, about which we've talked a lot here. I love the book. And he put me onto a book that has just come out about the academy, that is a critique of the AAUP. And what it says is a flawed understanding of what the corporation is in this country. It's called The Autocratic Academy is the book I'm talking about. Just came out this year. And I started reading it, and just show everybody here, The Autocratic Academy, re-envisioning rule within America's universities. Anyway, this long segue that I'm trying to build here is that the book is arguing that a flawed understanding of what a corporation is and what a corporation's potential could be, and misunderstanding that the higher education in this country, universities were built on this American corporate model, which creates this fundamental misunderstanding against which we're all struggling. It's to me, it'll be interesting to see, to your question, to what extent maybe I and others can push the AAUP to consider some of this in light of what George Jackson has to say about the corporation, this country's, as we're going to talk about this morning, fascism, organization and fascism, and what obviously can and must be done about it. So anyway, there was an attempted segue in there.
It's there. It's like you're weaving. You have a loom. You're just like, putting in all the colors and like,
there you go.
You make a serape or something really gorgeous to hang on the wall. But theft, right? Theft follows art and revolution. And so, I mean, there's a lot to weave in. I mean, what is the relevance of George today? And George is an educator. So, he's a teacher. And there's a kind of interest in him in the academy. And so is that going to be fidelity to his thought? I mean, it doesn't mean you do everything he said, right? But there's a faithfulness to the integrity of his willingness to take all risk for liberation, or does he become a commodity? So corporations sell stuff, right? And so to what extent is it possible to work so that George is not captured in a commodities market?
Yes,
I wanted to
go ahead, please.
I wanted to read I know we're talking about Blood in My Eye today, and we're in the third section, but there's another book which I think of almost not quite a companion, but it's adjacent. Gregory Armstrong's The Dragon Has Come. So Armstrong is, or was, I don't know if he transitioned, a white radical. This is a biography. It's like the last 14 months of George's life. And it's in the way he puts the promo, or the publisher does on the press, and it's Harper and Row, talk about a corporation. They say that he was the editor and friend of Jackson, but excuse me, he notes the distinctions. Hey, Kalanji, good morning.
Peace. Good morning. Good morning.
Peace.
And like Armstrong is from Harvard. So he's like, I graduated from Harvard. So that's the height of the play, the game of corporate education, right? And then he says George graduated from San Quentin High. But then he talks about how they could be linked. So I just want to read quickly 2 paragraphs and then I'll stop. It says, I met George Jackson when he was beginning his 10th year in prison and his hair was just starting to turn gray. He had spent 7.5 years of the preceding decade in solitary confinement. Once he had been locked up for 1.5 years with the door of his cell welded shut. So I had to read that 3 times before I could process. Sleeping only 3 hours a night. Doing 1,000 fingertip push-ups each day to keep in shape and work off sexual frustration. Reading everything from Plato to Stendhal to, I probably didn't pronounce that correctly, to Marx. Sometimes talking to the authors of the books he read as if they were there in the same cell with him. Because I was his editor, I had a special place in his life. Once when I was with him inside Soledad prison, he explained to me how a man would feel about someone who helped him to escape. Why there wouldn't be anything, quote, this is what George said, he wouldn't do for that guy for the rest of his life, end quote. For George, in at least one respect, I became that man. I gave him a simulation of something he wanted more than anything else. In the end, his book, Soledad Brother, was the closest he got to an existence outside prison. So again, being repetitive, text, study, commitment, passion. I mean, the last 2 are what organizers have. The first 2 is structured within the corporation, but perhaps we can drill into it, and alter some of its trajectories.
Right on. Excellent. Thank you very much. Anybody have an idea or a preference how we want to proceed? Any summaries or points that either of you would want to bring up from this section? What we're calling part 3, which ends at page 140 for those following along, 114 to 140. But go ahead.
I'm cool riding shotgun today. So go ahead and pull off, and I'll pull up. How about that?
Well, Professor James, let me defer to you then, because admittedly, multiple delays on the flight and a late arrival and then an early morning run to the airport to see off my babies for their summer. I'm a little underorganized, underslept, but at the same time, anyway.
Okay, I'm like, y'all want me to do that captive maternal labor.
Oh.
I'm glad the babies are having fun in summer, but like I'm off the clock right now. But I'm happy to be in dialogue. And maybe we could start with the things that I've been following you both, right? You guys have been talking about in terms of going back to commodification. How is it, right? We can pull some chapters and passages out of George in terms of his militancy and his revolutionary commitments. But how is it that nonprofit sectors find George attractive, given what he actually says in print? And how is it that increasingly people are writing their dissertations or they got their PhDs and now they're writing books? So what I'm curious about is the non-revolutionary and the anti-revolutionary is attracted to George. And that's why I started off with George. Gregory Armstrong, the white Harvard guy who becomes the editor. He's attracted to George, but he's going to make certain kind of sacrifices. He's not going to break him out, right? No, again, we could be, Kalonji was on Ryan Napoli's show with Dequi, right? And it was, briefly comes up, Asada's daughters, and all this kinship, right? That's coming out of the university, that's coming out of the publishing houses. Like we're adjacent. I was wondering if maybe both of you, because you've been talking about this for the last couple of weeks, could sort of figure out why this particular persona, who is kind of as real as it gets in terms of revolutionary struggle. I know there are other folks, political prisoners, people still inside, but why does he become so iconic for non-revolutionaries and anti-revolutionaries?
You want to chop first? You want to?
I mean, I think about this in a version of this question all the time, and I can't come up with a good answer, and I don't have any solid evidence to support my speculation. But I think that in general, we are in a time where the most extreme moment where all of the problems of the world can be put on the table and yet discussed and presented and interpreted in the most reactionary, conservative, and at best liberal ways. And I think in part, this is part of that there is an increasing need to co-opt revolution, from ideas to politics to organization. I admit I just had an extensive, multiple hour-long conversation with Dhoruba, building off of his conversation the other day with Kalonji, and this discussion of what is radical and how is radical being defined. And I think I can't help but think that this is part of it, and that I don't know that there is anything overt in terms of instruction from above, per se, but there is, I mean, really, there are ample experiences, both written about, some in some study, talking about the influence of the academy on intellectuals and young students. That is not necessarily some directive to instruct people to a certain form of study, but that encourages certain forms of study for purposes beyond even the recognition of the persons involved. So I'm saying that there could be some directed interest. It could be part of this. I mean, it goes, I mean, to the whole Asada taught me, to the whole projection of Black Lives Matter becoming BLM, becoming Black Lives Matter and not Black Liberation Movement. I think all of this is part of what we're seeing happen. As more radicalism bubbles up from below, there is an increased need and effort and design to co-opt and corrupt it. And I do think that this is part of that, having people that I'll stop here, but there's that line that I always quote from Francis Stoner Saunders' book on cultural wars, where there was this indirect directive. It doesn't mean you tell Jared he must write about such and such and such and such a way. You simply hire the people or fund the people that you already know are going to frame and interpret any subject in the way that is acceptable. So this can be plugged in an attempt, even with George, to say George and political prisoners can get increasing conversation and discussion, but only in certain sectors and in certain circles and by certain well-placed pundits and academics, public speakers, etc., that will result in insufficient both understanding and frame and interpretation of whatever the subject is, including George. So that is, that's the speculation, sort of the space of speculation that I'm in when it comes to trying to consider that question.
Yeah, I think for the big game hunter, the lion's head is safe when it's on the wall. You understand what I'm saying? So George is an ancestor now, and there's no pride, there's no cubs, there's no movement to uphold or to even expand or expound on George's philosophies. You know what I'm saying? And his brand of revolution. You know, the lion's safe in the cage. You could throw rocks at it. You know what I'm saying? The kids could rattle it. You can make fun, and the whole nine. So it's cool. It becomes a commodity. And it goes back to what we talked about some weeks ago around Harriet Tubman, in the CIA quad with the the statue. So we look at folks like George, we look at folks like Malcolm, we look at so many other freedom fighters, the BLA. We look at Asada. Asada is considered legendary and safe because, again, she's in Cuba right now. But all of these people that's talking about, their Asada's kit and kin, many of those folks would have called the police if they knew that she was next door for fear of a move attack. They wouldn't want their property to be destroyed. They wouldn't want to be shot by accident, whatever the case is. So George is safe right now. You know what I'm saying? Blood in my eye can be like a fantasy type thing. George can be looked at as some folk hero. And of course, Hollywood has already tried to water him down with the fake Black August films and all of that type stuff. You know what I mean? So then you have these quote unquote nonprofit social justice organization who for all practical purposes are movement adjacent. They're not the movement, but they want to dictate the dance. They want you to believe that the movement is going in this particular direction. And in order for you to be considered a part of the movement, then you have to be cool with this part. You got to be with this namesake or part of this clique or whatever the case, or you can become ostracized. You'll be ostracized and they will use you. They will suck and siphon the blood out of you right before your eyes. And will have you confused yourself because of the fact that they're like, well, man, you too rough to be, radical, you know what I'm saying? Or you can't, you too revolutionary. We have to remember, if we really look at George's writings, one of the things that George talked about is a revolutionary being a doomed man. You understand what I'm saying? These folks don't want to be doomed. They want to check. You understand what I'm saying? They don't want revolution, they want reform. As George was talking about, reform is advanced fascism. You know what I'm saying? It's a part of the program. This is how it goes. It's a natural remedy. It is a way of what Malcolm talked about with Novocaine. You bleeding and you can't even feel it. You know what I mean? So these folks right here, they are, it's by design. I don't think it's by accident. I don't think they have some affinity for George. I think that George is the new player on the block. I think they ran him up with Malcolm. Spike did his thing. They did that spin, and now it's George's turn. And then it'll be Asada's turn once she's gone. You know what I'm saying? And so on and so forth. This is how it goes. We don't even look at Harriet Tubman as a revolutionary anymore.
She's on the CIA builder or whatever. The FBI was, one of the,
It's CIA.
Sorry. CIA,
no, they're cousins all in the family. Yeah, so I'm sorry, I'm doing my like teacher mama thing. So when you were talking, Kalanji, I was thinking of like, and also you were saying, Jared, like how this capture of the concept of the person, and you're not really interested in the person, you're interested in what they would be in the market. And I started thinking of political porn. Like, at some point, it's like, oh, we're not edgy enough. We need to spice this up. People are bored with us. We need a new brand. So you go to the edge of what you think is the margin, but you know that it's no threat because you're going to interpret. And I wanted to look at it's on page 117, the chapter on withdrawal, because you bring up Dhoruba, and Dhoruba talks the lead, I haven't seen or heard everything he said, right? But he goes back to a united front against fascism. And so that makes me think like the 1940s when Mao was like making a statement about the Nazis, pushing into Soviet space. And then 1969 when the Panthers with SDS to the United Front Against Fascism. And then the work, Kalanji, that you've done with the Republic of New Africa, in terms of the violence. I believe it was in Mississippi. So I want to read these 3 paragraphs and maybe we could focus on this because it's a failed revolution. That's what he's saying. So for those who have their text 117, after revolution has failed, all questions must center on how a new revolutionary consciousness can be mobilized around the new set of class antagonisms that have been created by the authoritarian reign of terror. At which level of social, political, and economic life should we begin our new attack? And so based on what you both said, and I don't know how y'all feel about this, maybe we don't like the verb attack, but nonprofits are going to be the bane. And so it's at what point do we actually, it's such you and me, Jared, because we're in a particular industry that is tied to nonprofits, right? So at what point do we actually engage in I'll just call it a verbal attack, an analytical attack? Back to George. First, we, the Black partisans and their vanguard party, the old and new left alike, must concede that the workers' revolution and its vanguard parties have failed to deliver the promised changes in property relations or any of the institutions that support them. This must be conceded without bitterness, name-calling, or the intense rancor that is presently building. There have been 2 depressions, 2 great wars, a dozen serious recessions, a dozen brush wars, crisis after economic crisis. The mass psychosocial national cohesiveness has trembled on the brink of disruption and disintegration repeatedly over the last 50 years, threatening to fly apart from its own concentric inner dynamics. George is an incredible writer. I just had to say that. But at each crisis, it was allowed to reform itself. With each reform, revolution became more remote. This is because the old left has failed to understand the true nature of fascism. Last paragraph. We will never have a complete definition of fascism because it is in constant motion, showing a new face to fit any particular set of problems that arise to threaten the predominance of the traditionalist capitalist ruling class. But if one were forced for the sake of clarity to define it in a word simple enough for all to understand, that word would be reform. Excuse me. We can make our definition more precise by adding the word economic. Economic reform comes very close to a working definition of fascist motive forces. And so I want to ask you both then, because you've had Cornell on 3 times, and I know I'm right. I was at Union, very gifted, it's made significant contributions. But how is anything, and I'm for third parties, but how is it what we do not going to be captured under that rubric of reform that George put out on the table?
My initial answer is that he says in a few pages later that, and I'm not doing it justice because to your point about his brilliant writing, but somewhere in here in the next few pages or somewhere in this section, he says something to the effect that every stage of political struggle must be met by a military component. And this is what I always keep thinking about is the challenge in the struggle and even the contradiction of dealing with George, that the only way to make a Cornel West run mean anything real per se is to have parallel forms of organization supporting it and movement supporting it. Otherwise, it does just get captured. So I think that's and that paragraph that you just ended with is just, well, the whole book. I mean, it's just bar after bar after bar. But yeah, that to me is the only way I can keep where I struggle myself in reading George is that point about the parallel forms of organization and struggle that have to come with whatever else that we're doing. And rarely does that happen. So we end up with another form of what you just were asking about in terms of the capture. But yeah.
Right. I think that, and I agree with what you're saying, Jared. If it's a form of strategy, then I'm all for it. If it's like, but not like you said. You said supporting the movement, supporting. I would say the movement has to run it. You know what I'm saying? And we really have to handpick our quote unquote folks who we want to run for office. We had a concept called the block party. And the block party was where we picked certain brothers and sisters in the community that are clear politically, not clear with electoral politics, but have a strong political analysis and a concrete analysis as to what it is that this fight is about, and that it's not the end all means, and that it's just is what Huey was talking about, a survival program to get us to dry land, right? So I look at it like a Cornell can be useful. Now, I'll also say that we should not expect Cornell to get up talking revolutionary talk and he's trying to qualify for the Green Party. You know what I'm saying? The first thing he has to do, we have to recognize that, okay, this is a state position. Now, if he gets closer, or if he let's say by whatever, let's say he ended up in office, then I say go for broke. But I think that one thing we do is we expect a lot when giving a little. You know what I'm saying? It's like he's still Cornell. He's still 1 foot over here, 1 foot over there. So I think it's the who is the machine behind him. That's what's important. I think that it was good that he moved from whatever the first party he was trying to qualify with, the People's Party. That makes my tongue hurt saying that because I don't see that as a People's Party, but that's just me. But I think that if if he has the right people who are guiding him in a direction that's necessary, then perhaps it could be useful. Will he be useful? I don't know. I'm not, not really into electoral politics, but I'm down to use whatever tool to dismantle this particular system. Did I say something wrong?
No, I think I was just waiting for Professor James to just respond or add on, but sort of just going in order. But no, yeah.
Oh, are you going in order now, Jared?
It's a new day.
No, only in certain formations, and I am happy to follow orders in certain formations and go in order. So absolutely.
In other words, you and Daruba. But go ahead.
This would be one. I'm happy to follow instructions in this formation right here. I'm a sucker for hierarchy and organization and leadership. So if I feel like it's righteous, I'm down with it. Let's go.
You and I both had our brain cells re-altered by military culture, but what I guess I want to know, like, I'm gonna just echo what Jared said. I mean, I say I want marching orders, but then I'm like, oh no, not that. I don't want to do that. But I would be interested if it were articulated, and I'm more than interested. I'd try to be as supportive as I can. But I don't believe at this point we have a common language. So is this what BPM function would be, is to clarify the language of struggle, because it gets mystified. What's a radical? What's a revolutionary? What's a reformist? What's a non-reformist reform, or whatever? Like, the language gets played around with so much that it becomes a costume. It's like people get dressed every morning, they have a full-length mirror. It's like, let me put this on, this is a good look. But then, it's like, so where are the material conditions of struggle outside of the academy and outside of like all that money that got thrown at or soaked up or absorbed by nonprofits? So, like, if the thing when I read George, I see his love. I've said that before. And then people get like, what's that? Well, I don't figure it out. And I see his resistance to co-optation, but I also really see his clarity as a wordsmith. Like, when he says something, you totally understand what he's saying. He's not dressing up with it, right? So
Right.
how would BPM bring the clarity of language more to the front? Not the performative language, and not the language that makes you look radical when you're not. And I understand, I got to keep a paycheck too, so I'm not going to do, you got to feed kids, take care of elders, pay mortgages, whatever. Those who are privileged, to have a mortgage, which is really, you're just paying the bank twice the amount of what you're supposed to be paying for that.
But they tell you own it, so it feels better.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, it's just like, hey, we're gonna sucker punch you, but it's gonna feel good because it's a massage. So, but the language, how do you see BPM's role? Like, you guys have what, 10, 15 more podcasters in your network now? Everybody's making contributions, but now we're talking about this revolutionary. So how is this revolutionary relevant to BPM?
I think that for me, and I can't speak for everyone else because again, we all, we look at things in different ways. But one of the efforts that my contribution and attempt is to um maintain the line, hold the line. If we're saying this is Black Power media, then I'm more for Black Power than the media. You understand what I'm saying? We have to make sure that the definitions are tight, and that what is the direction is the right direction, right? Always say that, we might not be on the same page, but we need to be in the same book. And sometimes I can question what book we in. But for me, when it comes to people like George, I like to bring in like the OG Kamasis, people who knew him. You understand what I'm saying? I try to stay as close to the source as possible. I try to bring in folks from the particular movements that we're speaking on, or people who are as close to experts as possible. I make attempts to just stay away from as much as possible from folks who have just read George. You know what I'm saying? I want to know the people who were actually around him, what did they have to say of him? So, learning from folks like OG Shaka, who is an ancestor right now, these are individuals who can tell you about George's day to day. You know what I mean? Because oftentimes we look at the book, we look at the films, and we have our own uh, vantage point, we have our own interpretation. And I know for a fact I've been on panels where certain individuals try to explain what it is I was saying, like I needed a ventriloquist or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, well, see what the brother is trying to say. That's not what I'm trying to say. It's clear what I was trying to say, and I think that's one of the attempts that they're making on people like George. But Black Power Media, if I had it my way, excuse me, it would move towards revolution. It would be a platform, a form of communication, like the Black Panther paper, like the Black Panther party paper, you know, an information, a source to make sure that we never forget what it is we're here for. And that doesn't mean we can't laugh. It doesn't mean that we can't joke, but the serious nature of the state and the serious times we're in have to be clearly defined, or we'll be confused. And these 28,000 subscribers that we have, then they'll just be coming on for entertainment. So that's just how I see it. I know I kind of went all over the place, but
no, as Dr. James said of me earlier, what was it? Weaving a tapestry, something like, I'm on the loom. I'm gonna go back and find that clip. I think that's a perfect way of describing. But
you said it better. You put in tapestry.
Okay.
You don't look it up.
All right. Okay. So I was reading one of these multiple delays last night. I was reading a little bit of that new book, the Shakurs, about where in the section where they're talking about Assata in particular and her incarceration and ultimately her escape. And one part that's really going even back to Professor James, what you were saying earlier in an earlier question, it reminds me of what there's a brief moment in that book where they're talking about how the state's media took advantage from their perspective of Assata or Joanne Chesimard at the time to create this. They were like, well, okay, fine. You're going to raise up a revolutionary. We're going to re-image this person as the ultimate boogeyman, the ultimate demon responsible for every negative thing that ever happens, and hold her up as an excuse to punish an entire movement. Herself, of course, specifically, but an entire movement. And project that back to a society in a way that it will, as Fanon once said, testify against the very people that produced this revolution and this revolutionary. And so I feel like that's the moment we're in now, and what I want BPM to be a bulwark against. And that's the why I keep talking vaguely about BPM being this Black radical public sphere where we can get more of a public exchange with interpretations, frames, and ideas that are not sanctioned and not brought up and that are attempted, as Kalanji was saying on panels, to be reinterpreted right in front of us. Because I think what Kalanji, you just said as a personal experience, is happening to us collectively as we speak. We even have other platforms. I mean, so part of it, I would like to see BPM become more aggressive in calling out other people and platforms. I know this often said to be not to be the best strategy, or tactic, but I do want us to be this uncomfortable space where for sort of for all of us, that invites us to consider versions and interpretations and actions that make us uncomfortable. And then for others, it makes them uncomfortable knowing that we're here, sort of unmovable, unavoidable, reminding them that they are not the proper frame of these ideas, so that we can be there to say, as Kalanji would say, I don't need you to reinterpret what I just said. Like, here we are. So anyway, again, back on the loom, I feel like that's sort of what I would like to see BPM be, and become more aggressively, and saying, we're going to have fun. We're going to make jokes with each other. We're going to have parties. We're going to do Ear Doctor Sundays and all of that and more. But I do want us, myself included, when I tune in, as is often the case, I'm uncomfortable, but in a way that I think we need to be uncomfortable, that we need to be challenged. And that's how I feel when I deal with George. That's what I like about engaging George's work, because it's wildly uncomfortable, but I don't want to be comforted at this, in moments in a world like this. So I want the discomfort, and I want BPM to be that. And then maybe we can move into spaces offline. Kalanji talked about the Black Party. I've been, talking about this after party idea, that we can become something that, if not itself is an organized effort, but inspires organized efforts that are offline, off camera, off microphone, in spaces where we need to be in real struggle, and where all the answers will ultimately come. But
yeah, I think that, and I really, I predict that this is the direction that we're going going towards, you know, because it's too, as the preacher man used to say, it's getting late in the evening, right? So I'm starting off with self-criticism. So as I think it was Flip Wilson, he did a skit about the judge, right? And he was talking about how this particular he was playing a judge, and he said, I'm gonna start off by giving myself 30 days. You know what I mean? So you know what everybody else up in here getting. So I'm starting off, I'm taxing myself first. So we're doing, you know, we cleaning up the platform and we taking it to St. Elsewhere. You know, so my position right now, you know, there are too many ancestors who have been martyred. There are too many freedom fighters who are political prisoners who are literally, um, you know, dying a slow death, rotting away as folks are playing games. And I think that it's a criminal act. And I need folks to understand, because I think that oftentimes when we talk about revolution, and I know Jared talked about making this a black radical sphere. Yeah, I say we make it a black revolutionary sphere. And I think that, you know, I think that oftentimes folks confuse people like me, and they think that, okay, well, he's talking tough talk or all this type stuff. I'm not here. You know, again, we talking about love. And that is the only reason that I believe the majority of us are here for. It's about love. It's about the love of our people. It's about the love of our ancestors, love of our political prisoners, so on and so forth. So I may come off, you know, a little sharp with the tongue, and you know, that's just that, man. Either you get used to it or turn the channel. But this is the direction that we must go in order for us to advance as a whole.
Just very quickly, because well, both of you have touched on this point, and I just wanted to share something. I know it's not from Blood in My Eyes from Soledad Brother, but this is something that we have used in terms of our satirical hate awards. Two quotes that guide the principle of it. Sophia Bakari's point about being willing to be subjected to the rapier knife of revolutionary criticism if you're serious about creating revolution. But George's point here, where he said, I dig people, righteous people. I have always found it hard to really hate anyone. I loved people. I understood from the beginning that the end purpose of life was simply to live, experience, contribute, connect, to gratify the body and mind. I began to hate when I discovered that the mystification was injected intentionally. And that, for me personally, is exactly how I feel. Like you all are doing this on purpose. All of these inequalities and all this suffering is being done not by the accidents of nature and human activity, whatever. It's being done on purpose.
But that's what our liberation is about.
Like I'm starting to get
but that is what our liberation is about. Yeah. If we don't do it on purpose, then what are we doing? By accident? Are we playing with it? Or we want to get on YouTube and say, hey, we out here. You know what I'm saying? We, you know, look at us. We got a rap game and whatnot. We ain't trying to get no record deals. This isn't entertainment, you know. But I believe that, I think that honestly, a lot of these individuals are taking it as entertainment, for entertainment purposes only, because, you know, and I don't get it twisted. You know, war is not a beautiful thing. No sane person wants bloodshed and carnage and burning, and you know what I'm saying. But this is what's going on, what's taking place with individuals across the United States and across the planet daily. I mean, we are under attack as a whole, and we're still trying to figure out, do we want to speak on certain issues and topics? You know what I mean? We must, as Black Power Media, we have to take this all the way. We got to talk about what's going on in Tunisia. We got to be talking about what's going on in France. We got to be talking about what's going on in Burkina Faso, everywhere, wherever there's oppression. That's what it's about. But for me, I don't know. I just feel like man, sometimes I feel like we more George Jefferson than George Jackson. You know what I'm saying?
Damn.
Some of these cats trying to move on up.
Oh,
But we got to change the paradigm, man.
Just for the record, so we're not confused, I will be appropriating that line. So I'm
used to it.
Let the record reflect.
A couple of the co-owners do, but they don't.
Okay.
Well,
thank you for your honesty and candor.
Yes, thank you.
So I want to ask y'all about the emotional register here with George. So I'm assuming I'm talking to cisgender Black men, right? So in the context, without being reductionist about, like you can stereotype anybody, right? How do you see this mutation that he undergoes while incarcerated? I mean, I'm going back to what I read with Gregory. Like, it's one thing to be locked in a cell, and of course, I've never been in one, so I'm not claiming personal experience. But to have your cell, somebody come up with a blowtorch and just like seal it shut like a tomb, right? And so how you survive and what you become under those zones of terror and degradation is another kind of human. Some people debate whether or not we are, but I'm not going down that road right now. So how do you see, like, nobody wants to mutate under those conditions. We like to mutate under like seminars and tutorials and platforms and degrees and nonprofits. Everything we've sort of said needs to be reinvented or disappeared. How do you see the emotional intelligence as part of George and part of your construct of VPM? Like, I hear the love, I hear the anger, I hear the rage against dishonor and abandonment of our people internationally, right? People in struggle, trying, you shoot a 17-year-old when they're in the car. In France, Nahel. But how do you see emotional intelligence being part of George's writing and what draws us to his writing and our willingness to look in the mirror and kind of decide that we have to mutate into something else?
Damn, that's a heavy. Kalanji, you gotta go ahead.
I like how Dr. Joy James is doing the interview right now of us. Feels like a setup. I was expecting Dr. Ball to respond. You're gonna throw it back to me.
I mean, no, I'm admitting it's a heavy question, so I admit I'd like a second to to get some thoughts together. But
I need the question to be repeated because I'm not gonna lie, I was zoning into, I was still caught up on the welding the cell shut. You know what I'm saying? And
yeah, that makes sense because that's emotionally disturbing. I mean, this is the whole empire is just like it's a brutal war. It's also a psych game.
It is.
Like, if you can mess people's minds up, then they're easier to control or off because they're not prepared for self-defense. But then rather than becoming a psychotic, even though some academics have claimed George was, he was not. He became a mutation, still human, still man, still Black man, but something else. And that, which is why decades later, 50 years later?
Right.
We're reading George and talking about him on this digital platform that never existed in his day or era.
Right.
So we can say this is progress, but then what does it mean emotionally, psychologically? How do you grapple with the monetization of Black death and the constant wars from predatory policing to become like a more whole human or more whole being who keeps their emotional registers?
I think that, to your point about George dropping these jewels about 51 years ago, going on 51 years, I think that remembering that he was a 29-year-old, well-studied, self-taught when it came to the physical side of things. And just fast forward into now and looking at the different ways that imperialism has expanded, and looking at, again, I think looking at the whole nonprofit, and for clarity, this isn't a diss towards all nonprofits. So I don't want anybody to get it twisted. Like, I work for a nonprofit and we do great work. Then I'm not talking about you. There's certain sectors, there's certain nonprofit social justice movements who want to redefine what is and what's not revolutionary. So that must be properly understood. It's also important to know that, an important reminder that political education, spirituality, physical fitness is good for the mental, right? There has to be some type of balance, or you would literally explode, I would imagine, right? Because when you see a lot of this, like you said, the folks who are hijacking legacies and monetizing and commodifying Black death, or what I call bathing in the blood of our martyrs. Because I really feel like a lot of folks have turned this thing into some type of radical playground. They've turned it into T-shirts and look how many books I read, but I haven't applied anything. I'm smarter than you. I can break this down better than you. I can make more money than you. You know what I'm saying? My salary is bigger than yours. We can take these international trips and talk about how broke we are. You understand what I'm saying? When, as movements, and we can brag about it and call that revolution. You know what I'm saying? When you have folks who are, I know organizers who can't make it across town. They can't even afford a damn bus ticket or a token. You know what I'm saying? But we have these state-funded groups and individuals who are commissioned to write and who make careers from bloodshed and from imprisonment, from the carceral system. So I think that for me, the way I maintain is, I got to take a walk. I got to breathe. I got to work out. I got to study. I got to do something, or I'd be a madman, because I don't know how it's possible for any quote unquote conscious human being to see how this system is destroying the planet, literally, the environment, what I'm saying, killing off all life, imprisoning all forms of life, torturing us, murdering us in the streets daily. And we sit back and act like nothing's happening. Or we debate each other back and forth on words and phrases and shit, but that's not changing anything at the end of the day. I'm sorry.
Well, just to start where you just ended, I think part of what, and going back to Professor James's previous question, that part of what BPM has to do is help build clarity around the language. So maybe at least here in that context, some of that debate could net in something positive, in the sense, just even going back to what is radical, what is revolution, what is fascism. I was just in a session this weekend where the idea in the discussion around professors, the rights of academics, is being described as the devolving condition with the rise of fascism under Trump. And I'm sitting in with the idea, as it was openly expressed, that a vote for Biden was a step in the right direction. And I'm sitting in the back, literally thinking about what George is saying here about fascism is just reform. It is an economic arrangement that is decidedly targeting scientific socialism in all of its forms internationally. And so I'm sitting there listening to, and yet I'm in a room with people saying, no, fascism only can be defined in association with Donald Trump. So I think on some level, obviously that's a different setting, but as it is here, I think what you and Daruba raised the other day around defining radical is the kind of argument and discussion or debate that we should be having here in BPM. But anyway, that said, I wrote a couple notes here trying to think, make use of the time that Kalonji you were giving me, thankfully, to try to come up with a cogent response. And I got stuck on the phrase, Professor James, of emotional intelligence. And then I just went anecdotally into my own limited experience that I've only been locked up over short periods of time. So the only real comparison I can think of, which is insufficient, is the military. And being on a ship out at sea for 7 months, I know to this day, and I felt it then, did real damage to me. I don't know about anyone else. I've suffered greatly over that, and felt the devolving of my principles and humanity. And was not studied or committed enough at the time to develop what George was developing in his very much more intense, obviously, situation. But in other words, even the reading Who Killed George Jackson and listening to some others talk about the day-to-day, as you were saying, Kalonji, that he lived, what George had to do to survive, to develop the sort of power and authority over other prisoners, to maintain himself just literally physically alive, and then to develop something that we would see, at least in a form. And we have to admit, even, as much as we appreciate what we're dealing with, like even Blood in My Eye is still a version, maybe a more accurate and self-directed version of George, given to us by George. It doesn't give us the day-to-day that he's, it doesn't show us what he's dealing with and how he's getting himself to this point necessarily on a day-to-day basis. In other words, how does he develop that emotional intelligence to not let his conditions devolve him into a useless or reactionary form of humanity, and to go in the exact opposite direction. And to that point about the entombment, I mean, again, I couldn't help thinking. I spent many, many days and hours in a small ship's armory with one door that could be locked from the outside, that had no windows and was barely bigger than a closet. And you're in there with one other person for 12, 15, 20 hours at a time. And it was making me become something I didn't want to become. And I don't know how I don't know. I'll end here by saying I'm just even more impressed. So I wrote here in this note, I said, fascism in reform reproduces the accuracy of George's analysis and recreates versions of George Jackson. So that's why I'm thinking that his value to this day, it resonates, because the reform he was talking about, that fascism masks itself in, is what we're dealing with 50 years on from the writing of this book. And it is producing variations of George Jackson's emotional and even political response. And I would like to see BPM play more of a role in cultivating that, to say that, almost as a reminder, when you feel your humanity devolving, as I know I felt, even as a younger man, incapable at the time of even expressing clarity around what I felt was happening. If we can speak some sort of, I don't know, analysis or framing to that many people are experiencing in their own lives right now, that I think would be of great. It would rise to the level of the mission that it is, as I perceive it, that we have here at BPM. But also speaks to why George still resonates, and why, going back to the earlier point, why there would still be a need to corrupt and co-opt him, because it is recognized that he will resonate as those in power continue to produce the conditions that produce George. In the 21st century, there's going to be a need to corrupt that same response that would germinate and generate. Anyway.
No, I like to read something, 124, with George talking about revolution, right? And I think that one thing is certain, and two things are clear. If we really just look at things for what they are, and not just look at, like, who is adjacent to, to movement. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of folks, they talk movement, but they're more in line with the state, right? And for, multiple reasons. I know that, Joy, you named a couple earlier, comfort. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's, no one wants to be uncomfortable. Discomfort is not, as we talk about, our brother Balagoon talks about all the time, people will do more to escape pain than to gain pleasure, right? You can, you can go off, but you don't want that pain to eventually get you off the track. But he talked about, George talked about, he said, who will build on an ideal that begins with force? The Vanguard Party is now nationwide, but Vanguard parties cannot build revolutions alone, nor can the Vanguard Party expect full party line agreement before it moves in the direction of the people. Revolution is illegal. It's against the law. It's prohibited. It would not be allowed. It is clear that the revolutionary is a lawless man. The outlaw and the lumpen will make the revolution. The people, the workers, will adopt it. This must be the new order of things, after the fact of the modern industrial fascist state. And then he went on to talk about how the revolutionaries outlawed and the black revolutionaries are doomed, man, and all of the forces of counter-revolution is stacked up over his head. He's standing in the tank trap he has dug. He lives in the crosshairs. No one can understand the feeling but himself. From the beginning of his revolutionary consciousness, he must use every device to stay alive. Violence is a forced issue. It's incumbent upon him. The very first political programs have had to be defended with duels to the death. The children's breakfast programs haven't been spared. The next round of commune building could cause the third great war of the century. He said, we must build with the fingers of one hand wrapped around a gun. Again, with those words alone, you would think, like, what would that mean to some of these folks who are related to George, and they related to Asada, by words, and that they're getting these resources, and book deals to write about folks who they couldn't possibly respect. Because if you really study George and you really study a lot of these different freedom fighters, then one would think that you would gain something from that. But I don't think that that's the case in a lot of these situations. And I'm not just talking about the quote unquote academy, because there are a lot of organizations that call themselves grassroots. You know what I'm saying? And claim to be community organizations, but it's all photos and funding. You know what I'm saying? It's about, look what I'm doing, run that check. You know what I'm saying? And that's the reality. So it's different levels to this thing, man.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, please. Yeah.
Well, I was going to thank you both for, like, your candor, which is also part of your vulnerability, right? And I think, I don't know if people don't respect George, but I'm pretty sure most people fear George. And so for me, that's where the emotional registers come in, and they can't control the fear. I mean, they're not disciplined to control the fear. Like you were saying, Jared, when you're locked up, there's no window, there's not, I mean, anxiety just spikes. And what if you read George and you pay attention, your anxiety should spike too, because it's like, I think he left a really clear message here. And it's almost, in some ways, he's a seer. It's like this is the past, present, future, right? This is the oncoming, you know, desire of the state for slaughter, which reflects the present moment and reflects the historical past, you know, since, you know, 5 centuries or whatever, Middle Passage, human trafficking, exploitation, mass rape. So I'm curious if, I'm so interested in your platform right now, so I'm gonna keep asking you questions. I'm gonna annoy you.
We're gonna start asking you some questions too. I don't know if you think
No, yeah, that's not gonna happen because I'm like the one doing the dishes right now. So I'm wondering how you see BPM's emotional intelligence. I understand its radicalism and its militancy as it reflects George. Also, the call to love community. And you're both fathers, you love your children, you love your comrades, right? So you know what love is, but in its political form, on something that you've engineered, and the directive coming from George, like the directive I hear peace and love to Mumia, Daruba from last year after he came back from Europe. It's a call for a united front against fascism. That's a call it's not Black only, it's multiracial, it's across class, it's a certain discipline, and it's a certain ability to grapple with your fears so that you don't do like whacked out stuff that derails. So I'm gonna, how could BPM, as Jared says, not get stuck, and you're not stuck in the trap of Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis are the only fascists we know, right? Both parties are imperialists, which means they're fascistic, and they're capitalists. So we know what they are. But how is it that your leadership, that's the way I want to put it. Like George is a leader and BPM is a leader. How is it that your leadership can articulate the united front against fascism and also meet the emotional needs of your listeners?
I don't know, or I don't quite agree that BPM is a leader, because I don't think that we're all the way clear politically. I think we have to be in line all the way politically in order for us to be in a position of leadership. I think that, for me, I would argue that we are a conduit. You know what I'm saying? I think that we are making efforts to heighten the contradictions and to look at the line of demarcation, or put those floodlights that Fanon talked about, the floodlights of history, on the lines of contradiction and the lines of demarcation, I'm sorry, to elevate and show people what, lead them in particular directions, hopefully to politicize them. But I think it's also important, see, the difference between BPM and, I would say, a political organization is that, for all practical purposes, BPM right now, as it currently stands, is a business, because we don't have any mandatory political education, right? And in order for us to be an organization, we have to have similar politics. An example from that has to go from Sundiata to the ear doctor. You understand what I'm saying? And I know that currently, if we were to define Black power media, we don't at this time have a clear party line. Excuse me, clear party line or clear mass line. So if someone got us to speak up, if they choose any one of the quote unquote co-founders, and I'm just being candid, it's not a knock on anybody. I'm just telling you what you already know. You know, folks watch the platform, so it's not like I'm, you know, giving some trade secrets away or some shit. You know, we all won't represent the same way. We all don't have the same vision. Is that a knock on the platform? No, I'm just telling you what the facts are. I'm being honest. So I would hate for BPM to be looked at as leadership. And I am a part of an organization. I'm a part of a movement. I consider myself serious. I know we have some serious comrades on this platform. And to be quite frank with you, we have comrades and we have business partners. Not all of us are comrades. Might be going a little too far, but I'm just telling y'all what the facts are. So I would hope that BPM is not looked at as leadership, but I would hope that folks will look at us for what we are. We are in the toddler stages as a platform. We're 2.5 years old and we're trying to find our way and we're learning how to walk and we're bumping into walls. We make mistakes. We're not perfect, but we're giving you the best that we got. I don't think that anyone can deny that what we bring to the table can't rival with any other platform. But we have growth. And in order for us to, I think one of the things that George talks about, in order for us to advance, we have to be honest with where we are. We have to be honest with what we're looking to do. So, I would say join an organization. There are, many of us on the show that are part of organizations. We welcome you to that. Support BPM. Definitely support Black Power Media. Our hopes is that I think that the one thing we do have in common is we're all looking to grow and we're all looking to advance and we're looking to be a quote unquote voice made of the people, not the voice of the people, because we can't speak for all people. So anyway, that would just be my take.
So just a point of clarification, because I might have misunderstood the question. When you, Professor James, mentioned us as leadership, I thought you were talking about those who were the real or perceived leaders of this platform and how we would have the platform drive a certain, as opposed to being, as opposed to BPM itself being a leader, or am I?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure that I was clear when I put the word out on the table, but it was a word of expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I wasn't clear and I'm still not clear, but I would say, like, just responding to your query and also Kalanji's statement, this is snarky, but whatever. I mean, is it 2.5 human years or 2.5 dog years, right? Because under these conditions, this platform is unique. It has its contradictions, right? But I'm thinking about how George organized in prison. That was his zone. There weren't total agreements, I'm sure. And there was discipline, I'm sure that discipline was forced in some ways. And so you're not going to do that with your platform. We'll just make that clear. But there was the analytical rigor allowed the fluff to just fall to the floor or stay in the dryer, right? It's at some point, and I don't know how many years. I mean, he was there 13 years. So it didn't happen the first month, the first year, whatever. And back to emotional intelligence. When I read, I see that George loved M.L. Nolan, who was assassinated by the white guard, Miller.
Yes.
W.L. Nolan, sorry, right? Who helped politicize and educate. And so this is how I see this platform. And I'm going back to George's call for united front against fascism, Deriba's call, the call writ large. I think there are a lot of militant intellectuals who support that call. There aren't a lot of platforms that can articulate it. And I see as BPM being one of those platforms that could. And again, you've met with this presidential candidate for the Green Party several times. And so you have something that the candidate wants, or they wouldn't keep showing up on your platform. So reach out to your audience, interact with your analyses, sharpen their skills, and so forth. So I don't know if that makes sense. It's not. I'm not asking. I know you're not a vanguard. Maybe I should have used different language. I
And
don't.
I might have misunderstood your question as well. So I apologize if I to both of you if I went to Saint elsewhere. But yeah, I mean, you know, I just I agree with where you both are coming from. I think that in what you said about human years of dog years, yeah, they say that, you know, in revolution, what takes the masses 20 years, a revolutionary gets done in 2 years. I get that. However, what's important, again, is political education, group study. You know what I'm saying? And know that it's not, we're talking about, when you're talking about nation building, you don't expect everyone to totally move alike, think alike, so on and so forth. I mean, even Public Enemy had a Flavor Flav. You know what I mean? So it's like, you know, I mean, so there's different, you know, we are different, but again, you know, if we're in the Christian church, then everyone should have a Bible. If you're in the mosque, then everyone should have a Quran. Now, does that mean that they all study it? Not necessarily. But at the same time, we should be in the same book. So that's just my thing. And I'm not expecting us all to have the same politics, but we should be clear on who our enemy is and the difference between the comrade and the friend, the ally, and all of that. So I think that that's important.
So sorry, Jerry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead. It's all right.
So what's the possibility that we don't have a book and we'll never have a book? And so I'm remembering that when George was assassinated and the prison admin did inventory, 99 books in his cell, right? He's a, wide range reading, from Plato to Mao to, Fanon to, Malcolm. So I wonder, under those conditions of struggle, how they maintained unity and focus. And now, of course, they're in hell. And when we're on this side of hell, which is another layer or level of hell, those of us who have property, that have money, that eat on a regular basis, right? You don't feel the necessity to push yourself maybe the way that George and their comrades, Soledad brothers and others, again, re-engineered themselves. And so maybe I'm putting too much expectations on this platform. But I watch a different show, and I appreciate, Coco's show. There's just a number of shows that I watch, and they all make, in different ways, contributions, and they also have contradictions, and that helps me too. I think even the contradiction for me becomes a contribution to, or it contributes to me wanting to analyze more and understand discrepancies and gaps and erasures. So, he organizes in the most toughest terrain, which is prison. And I'm going from like campaigning to Cornell to organizing in prison. I know we talk a lot about political prisoners, but there's a whole other, tens of thousands of others. How would you like your function to be? Whatever it is now is one thing, but what are your aspirations for this intellectual cadre?
So just a couple of things. We have to remember how BPM formed. And so it was the really just the rushed, and I don't mean that in a negative way, combination of two podcasts with a broad set of agreeable politics, some of which that conflict and contradict one another. But which is, by the way, so I see BPM being blood in my eye. This is the way I was trying to conceive of it. BPM is the coming together in a hostile situation of a variety of perspectives that you were just describing George was working from on the books that were found in his cell. What I see us being as an overt public platform is the document that George left us. How to implement this is in many ways, just like in George's real life, that's something that's not in this book. That is done offline, off the record, off of this record, off of mics, off of cameras, and involves probably a lot of uncomfortable and hostile, contradictory things that we wouldn't want to engage in, but that we would have to figure out in terms of how to make real and implement outside of BPM. So to me, BPM is simply the blood in my a broad analysis and call to arms intellectually that has to be developed outside. So just as George was doing with this book, he was trying to leave us an organized framework from which to build, but the nuts and bolts of how to do it and how he did it are not in the book. The book also contains, for me, a couple of contradictions that I think reflect in BPM. So, for instance, when George says in the section we're reading for today that, in his love of Angela Davis, he recognizes that they have a different reading of the situation. Hers born out of, as he says, the old communist left that doesn't recognize, as Kalanji was just pointing out, that we have lost, we are in a moment of defeat, and doesn't want to recognize that because it fears that will lead us into pessimism. I feel like when I read that and reread that for today, I'm saying this is exactly what BPM is dealing with. We have a love for the people, a love of struggle, but we have a variety of differences and disagreements that all of us are bringing in from our various perspectives that have to get hashed out and dealt with, and we're struggling as a platform to do it. And I guess, yeah, so what I would like to see the platform continue to do is be reflective, as I think we're starting to get better at, reflective of the varieties of thought, and to become this book, even with its own perhaps contradictions. For instance, the other contradiction I was thinking of specifically in this section is that, he's talking about, that as George talks about, earlier in the book, he's saying we can't have any territory that needs defense because we have to be a mobile guerrilla entity. But at the same time, he's talking about the need to develop a commune that is going to be the space, physically, intellectually, whatever, that's going to I don't know, be the pastoral for the people and be the space that and be what takes over the state or becomes the new state once we achieve state power. So how do you create a commune if you're also having to not create spaces that require permanent space geographically or defense, et cetera? So that contradiction, as I'm understanding it, not exactly, is the kind of contradictions that are reflective in BPM. We're making a call to certain forms of thought and behavior, but we're not exactly, we don't have it all figured out. We are obviously not just one man writing, and we are bringing in all these vestiges of our previous experiences and perspectives, and trying to and what would happen, and then what I want BPM to be, as I was trying to say a moment ago, is the inducement to get us into more off record and into more organized spaces to do the hard work that is not in blood in my eye. So in other words, when George is making a call for various activities, his effort to build and organize the entities that would carry out those actions, that's not described in the book. The step-by-step, the details of that is not described in the book, and is I think out of necessity, left for those to figure out once they are committed to being in those organized spaces. But I don't know.
I unite.
Yeah.
I unite
Yeah.
with everything you're saying, and I think that you know, for the commune part, I would say, you know, we can have mobile communes, but that's a whole
Okay.
nother story. You know what
Right
I'm
on.
saying?
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
was just trying to point out, like,
yeah,
for
yeah,
me,
yeah.
it just that the we BP, and I'm trying to make this parallel for me, BPM is blood in my eye.
Right. No, and I
So
unite
how
with
do
that.
we? Yeah, but I hear you. Like, I don't know. Yeah, so I like that.
So
I like
so
that. Yeah.
so so for me, right? And I'm gonna be, you know, since it's candid day, you know what I'm saying? It's like let's just say what it is. I think that for me, Black Power media for me was selfish. I'm gonna just say that just like that. It was selfish. And when I say selfish, talking about out of organization, right? We've been working on as an organizer. One of the things that we've been making efforts to do over the past couple decades is to organize organizations. That is why FTP came about. FTP movement started. The goal, we sat down with a number of different organizations and we said that we were going to have a movement and we were all going to come together under one particular banner and we was going to have CI foods or whatever, so on and so forth. And we invited a number of different organizations here in Atlanta in 2004. And plenty of folks came out. When they saw some of these organizers saw that we were going to have accountability, there's going to be discipline, there's going to be training, there's going to be political education, there's going to be activity every single day. Slowly, folks begin to fall away, disappear, right? So FTP movement became more of an organization. Then eventually we grew into what we call the Siafu movement, and that's when we brought more organizations to be a part of this one particular thing. For me, I always felt in my soul that we needed a propaganda machine, right? As a people, a propaganda machine that can serve the masses and the organizations. So I look at BPM as like, this is going to be a place where it can be a hub of different podcast platforms, the whole a movement. You know what I'm saying? We some type of conglomerate situation. I always respected. I mix what I like. Dr. Jared Ball. You know what I'm saying? Because I knew that folks like him, folks like Davey D, and folks like, you know, a lot of the broadcasters at WRFG, I knew that as an organizer, if I ever had to put out any information or if I ever needed any type of propaganda push, that I can call on these individuals. So I always respected Jared's show. I always respected, I was a fan of I Mix What I Like. We started Renegade Culture, and some of you may have heard this story, but I'm just telling you, giving you backstory if you haven't, if you don't know. We started Renegade Culture in 2000, I believe 16, 17 or something like that. 5 years, 3 years before we started BPM. We did 100 and something shows. Jared was on a few. We was on I Mix What I Like. I called Jared up and was like, yo, what do you think about us doing a combined situation, putting together some type of network? He agreed. We brought on the other two fellas from Renegade Culture, and 2.5 years later, here we are. But again, for me, it was all about organizing organization. It was about building a network where we can have a number of different voices to push out propaganda. We know that when you look at Channel 2, Channel 5, Channel 7, you're going to get the same world news. So in my mind, I was like, okay, boom, we do something like that. We'll have at least one or two stories that everybody's pushing, at least one or two political prisoners each week that everybody's pushing. You know what I'm saying? Um, it wasn't for it to be just a super political podcast, because we like to use what we call the cherry cough drop theory. We make it taste so good, people forget it's medicine, right? So it was always about collective organizing, structure and building towards an anti fascist decolonization type machine. So that's what BPM meant for me, and that's what in my mind it'll continue to mean for me, because that's, you know, but I'm one of many though. But anyway, I don't know if you heard what I said, Jared.
Yeah, I heard all of that. Cool, I just had to jump off real quick, but so admittedly, there was a selfishness for me as well. So I have said before, I've always wanted a collective like this, and Renegade Culture was, if not among my favorite podcasts. So
come on, man, you know your favorite. Stop fronting. But go ahead.
Well, I was just trying to be honest, or think for a second if I was forgetting if I had, but no, it was. But I don't know that. I do know. I definitely did not have any clarity around what exactly I wanted it to be beyond really what it is now.
Right.
I just know I wanted to work in collectives. I wanted us to be part of a louder, again, the creation of a public sphere, a revolutionary public sphere. And that would help magnify our voices, because I was seeing very clearly what's happening and still happening in these YouTube streets and media in general. It's too atomized, too individual, and in many cases too professional in terms of people's relationships to the platform, which I think inhibits the kind of work that they're willing to do. But so yeah, I mean, so that's, yeah, I guess that's really the only response I have to what you were just saying there. I just didn't have the now, but that said, so the level of discipline and organization that you're talking about, I was more, and maybe still am, thinking is more what I would like to see people take outside of this space. So for instance, I want BPM to be the central media hub for SIAFU, for FTP, for community movement builders, for Black Alliance for Peace, for All African People's Revolutionary Party, for the Party for Socialism and Liberation, or even to the extent, and whoever, all of these and other groups. And then what we do here would be taken and built and made concrete and material by all of those different groups, and then they would come together to form maybe this maybe following a call we can become more aggressive with this united United Front Against Fascism. That said, also, I am, as I said earlier, a sucker for levels of organization, hierarchy, and discipline. So, that's why, since we're sharing here, I've been advocating that we bring on somebody who would do that for us, that would become, as I keep saying, a de facto CEO of sorts, not in the corporate sense, but who would carry out the vision of the founders and have the authority and the inducement to organize us to do some of the things, to make sure that we're doing the things, some of the ideas I think you said that are great, a consistency of message, a consistency of story, a consistency of this, that, and the third. But I think we need that kind of, and especially now where the platform is and where different issues have occurred, different fractures in relationships have occurred. I think we are definitely at a point where we have to have somebody outside of us operating under our auspice, but organizing and getting BPM maybe more, preparing BPM to be more capable to advance with the scaling of our platform and become more of a force that I think we all want it to be. Anyway,
for the record, because I don't want anybody to get anything misconstrued or be thrown off by what we're saying. I think that we all have the best interests of the platform at hand. I think we have the interests of the people at heart. But there's always room for improvement. I'm not complaining at all. I think that we've done wonderful work over the past couple years with 28 K on the subscribers. We're grateful for that. We're grateful for the quality of shows that we've been able to bring. I mean, we've had surprise birthday parties for Mumia and Jalil Muntakim. We've had international forums on the piece, hip hop artists, political candidates, different types of, all types of people, organizers, so on and so forth. We've been able to literally break news on the platform, so I think it's doing what it's designed to do. I think we've been rolling sort of like the waters that, during the Atlanta during the Atlanta slave trade, man, Atlantic slave trade. It's like we're just moving along, and there's sharks waiting to eat us. You know what I'm saying? That if we get thrown overboard, and sometimes people want to push us overboard, but at the same time, we're gonna win in spite of ourselves, because I think that the understanding of the need for organizational discipline, and the understanding for the need of political education uh, will sharpen us. It will move us in the direction that we have to. But I'm just saying we must continue to be careful as well, because we know that the state is always lurking. And I'm clear, for one, I'm clear that, as Malcolm said, you don't call a man brother till he operates like one. I know that every individual in the chat might not be for our interests. We'd be fools to think that, that there's no state sprinkled cyanide inside the chat, looking to misdirect, misguide, mislead, maybe even on a platform, who knows? But at the end of the day, our intent is pure. We try to bring on the sharpest individuals, those who we know with the best minds, the sharpest minds. We haven't been, we've been pretty welcoming to all types of Africans. Some we love and some we're not too fond of. But, I think that, like you said, as a media outlet, we are moving in the right direction. Anyway, Dr. James, where you at? See, you now throwing us into a whole discussion
No, it's totally related. As George writes, they'll never count me among the broken men.
That's right.
And we'll say broken women, broken people who are non-binary, trans, children. I still, listening to both of you, I hear your passion, I hear your commitment. And this could just be my limited capacity. I'm not quite sure, and I don't need to be sure or even know, because, I'm not one of the co-owners, co-founders. I'm not sure about the alignment with the revolutionary struggle, because it's a high risk to even commit to it. And there can be, we all have long lists of organizations and things like that. I mean, Jared, the other day I was watching your show, I guess we can say names, Color of Change, it's like all that money, and claims to radicalism. So the word radical, I'm just going to use the word that may not work here, is bastardized, right?
Thank you.
And you're welcome.
Lord Jesus.
And excuse me, the latter part now. And so there's this whole, I'm going back to what we started with, like an hour and 40 minutes ago. How do you stabilize language? George was able to do it because he was writing with blood. It's like blood in my eye. It was just like my veins are the ink, right? And also he's prescient. He's like, I'm not going to come out of this alive. But the text is a living text. And so now everybody's saying we want to take it to the next level. And then you can't reiterate or repeat what George did, right? But the next level, 21st century version of how do we outthink our opposition? How do we get our language back? How do we get our culture back? Et cetera, et cetera. I think that only comes with sacrifice. And that's maybe why I was asking about emotional intelligence. Like I say, like as fathers, you sacrifice for your children, right? You probably throw your body in front of the bullets or whatever. I mean, it's not, hopefully it doesn't ever get that dramatic. But all these organizations would have to agree to a loss of prestige if they were to align with George. And I didn't, you rattled off a long list of names. I can't disparage, criticize anybody. I don't belong to any of the organizations, so I don't know. But I just would say, as a basic fact, you would have to willingly sacrifice something in order to align with this type of revolutionary narrative, even if you were going to do a Martin Luther King version, like, when Bayard Rustin had him give away all the guns in the house. And he's like, I got kids. And Bayard is like, oh, don't worry about it. I'm sure he said more than don't worry about it. But anyway, King gave up, material self-defense because he was a practitioner of a transcendent vision, which is not what George is talking about. But I think there are some connectors. So sacrifice is part of struggle. And we're not well trained. I'll say that for myself, being bougie, whatever. I would have to undo a lot of conditioning in order to be better trained in sacrifice that wasn't always on my terms. And so I'm cheerleading here, I'm cheering for you and everything. But as we started talking about the co-optation of radical, let me give you an example, back to the sister, Asada. So in 2015, young Black sisters, students at Marquette, painted a mural in the Women's Studies Lounge or the Cultural Studies Lounge, which nobody ever goes into, right? Because like people of color have some say. Not a lot of people, Marquette. And it was a photograph from the memoir cover, the autobiography cover. And then that's the statement that she makes. I have to paraphrase it. Your opposition is never going to teach you how to liberate yourself. That's my, you can go look at the book and make sure. So some reactionary white prof who's going to be fired anyway because of his aggression against the students, he, walks through and he sees the mural and then he reports it to admin. So the shortnet is admin ends up firing the white woman who heads women and gender studies because she let the Black students paint the mural. But what's interesting, I mean, yeah, that stuff happens if you're trying to be an ally. But what's interesting to me is what happens when we discipline ourselves. So the young sisters are a member of one of the Black sororities. And it turns out, I think it's the same sorority that Michelle Obama becomes an honorary member or something. And this is under, of course, Obama administration. So what happens is the sorority heads tell the sisters to delete the image. It's not the white staff, I mean? It's a proxy. It's the runner. It's Malcolm's house and field. Like the house comes and says, I mean, you're all in university, so you're not exactly, unhoused or, working class. But when I hear about this and I reach out to my colleagues, because I'm visiting at a large university, Black colleagues, it's like, we all teach your book, like, let's do a petition stuff. What happens is people don't even respond to my email. And the one person who does, a sister says, no, I can't oppose this, First Amendment violation, right? Because I'm a part of the sorority too, and they may kick me out. I'm like, you're grown. Like, are they paying your mortgage, right? So, but it's this embeddedment in these other structures that want to be respectable, right? They want to be edgy. And what the sorority head said, and she now runs a, CEO of some nonprofit, is like, we didn't know who she was. I was like, you guys are kidding. It's like, we didn't know the FBI was looking for her. So that even the stories we tell ourselves try to extract us from proximity to revolutionary struggle after we try to be in the zone of revolutionary struggle by just painting a mural on a wall. And then what did Marquette do? This is so classic. they whitewashed the wall. They just got a bunch of white paint and some rollers and they rolled over the system.
Literally whitewashed it.
Literally, yes. Literally primer, whitewashed the wall. And so that's so ironic, kind of funny in like a really, grim sort of way, but totally predictable. But that we agreed to. What would happen if you got kicked out of your sorority? I'm sure you'd still get your degree, because the university wasn't trying to kick you out because they knew they would have violated a line, right? So you call in Black people who manage Black people by creating zones where they can belong and feel safe, to tell them, oops, baby, you stepped across the line. And that happens on a regular basis. And maybe I'm putting too much of a burden on BPM to be very different from that. But that would make me, just be cheesy about it, that would make me happy. Simple pleasures.
No, so, but if I understand your point, this is what I see BPM already doing. I just don't think my biggest critique, not my only critique, my biggest critique is that we're just not, we aren't currently situated, as I was saying a moment ago, to maximize the current scaling that we're slowly starting to experience. So, but it does. So am I misunderstanding you when I
No, this is, yeah, but I guess what I'm gesturing to is that as you create this platform and as you expand it, there will be disciplinary Black forces that will counter, which you already know, because I'm sure you could see it unfolding in real time, but countering that desire to take George's and analytics seriously. Again, we're not going to do what George did, presumably, but we know the political prisoners who risked everything and got tortured. And you guys have said multiple times, like, you want to be somebody's kin, but then you have to understand the larger family structure. Here are the people who broke them out and got tortured and caged for 33 years. How about this one who, finally got back to Italy after doing 20 years in the States, right? So you're inviting people to the family, but there's family structure. And I wonder how evident or clear that is stated. Like, if this is a revolutionary platform, and I don't think I know it's not totally aligned with George, and I don't even know if, I want to be honest, if I would be comfortable with that. But, I understand the rigor of his thinking. And I understand the not feeling it, except on an emotional level, but I can comprehend some of the risk he took to be clear. He gave his life in order to be clear and committed. And that is frightening to many people. And there's always people who offer carrots to be fuzzy rather than to wield clarity in terms of the fascism that we face.
So again, to the extent I understand what you're saying, I think that, again, if I'm gonna keep trying to build, see if I can hone this analogy I've started working with during this show. If BPM can become what I'm hoping it is, the blood in my eye of media, then as long as we, and to this extent, I do think we're doing this part, that as long as we adhere to certain, as George did, sort of analytical points of reference. So specifically, let me challenge myself: revolutionary internationalism, revolutionary solidarity, even beyond some notion of allyship. Pointing towards scientific socialism as a material construct or framework for building a society in the 21st century. Defense of at least the idea or an appreciation or a recognition of the historical role, positive and otherwise, of armed struggle, or as he talks about in this section, organized violence. Again, to your point, Professor James, we're not advocating it, we're not doing it, but I think to reflect an appreciation for its role, and at least a recognition of its role, separates us and challenges us to but at the same time, it does create the backlash that you're talking about, where whether it's simple disinvitation, omission, marginalization, uh, lack of recognition, all of those things occur. And that's why I keep thinking we need to be more aggressive in whatever principled way we do it, calling out and criticizing the non-profiteering, the liberalizing of these histories and individuals, as people look to attach themselves to these histories, or be part of the rebranding of these ideas and people and concepts, and et cetera and so forth. Yeah, I guess that's it. I guess yeah. I don't have but yeah. So I mean, if we and maybe we just need to be more organized. I don't know, or clear, or on the same page as to what those. But it seems like, I feel like BPM is already separating itself and forcing others to marginalize, misrepresent, co-opt, et cetera, and so forth. The collective effort we're trying here, but adhering to those platform planks, I think. Anyway, I don't know. Yeah, go ahead. What do you think?
I think that in order for us to, I think we're in cadence right now, right? So I think that once, eventually, we realistically, we're gonna have to find an alternative platform, because YouTube is only going to accept us moving so far in any particular direction, right? So eventually, we're gonna have to get our own servers. We're gonna operate from our own website, so on and so forth. Because at the end of the day, if we are to be the quote unquote blood in my eye of I don't know, what do we say, media? I'm not even gonna say podcast, of media. Then there's, I mean, there's consequences. You know what I mean? There's response, because we are truth tellers in the best way we know how, and we're bringing on strategists, tacticians. We're not just bringing on the popular crowd, and we deal with different forms of liberation. You know what I mean? We're talking about folks like myself instilling more culture. I think that, to a great extent, a lot of folks shy away from African culture. You know what I'm saying? I think that African culture is revolutionary in itself. So we're looking to infuse our brand of media with a different type of revolutionary fervor, and at the same time make it palatable. I think that's the beauty of what we bring to the table, and I think that's what was great about I Mix What I Like and Renegade Culture, because we were able to edutain. You had the education, and you had, we can still crack a joke or whatever, so on and so forth. I think those efforts have been made with like the Remix Morning Show, but I think that with our platform, with some of the new programming that will be coming on, and it would provide a broader field of African culture and liberation.
I would say, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Yeah, I know we're moving towards the close. I mean, for me as a listener or somebody who supports your platform, and coming out of this conversation, and I very much appreciate both of you and what you're sharing. I feel like there needs to be a lexicon. Like there needs to be I'm sure, like if you had a primer for K through 12 or something, and I'm not being, I'm not trying to denigrate anything, but it's just I keep hearing these words in different, and they have different meanings. So in the academy, it means one thing to be radical, revolutionary. I'm kind of like, no, that's really radical liberalism. But I mean, y'all gonna claim, okay, go ahead. And then the nonprofits, it's gonna be, no, you have a white corporate funder, so I don't see how that works. So it just keeps shifting. So again, the language doesn't seem to be stable, and it would be interesting if you, I don't know, when you meet with your podcasters or your hosts or something, like if you guys ever meet and talk about politics and the meanings of politics and what your language is, and it would just be helpful for me as a listener, like, oh yeah, I know what you're saying right now, instead of guessing. The other thing would be, I'm going back to the emotional. Well, let me stay with the lexicon. So I don't call it violence, I call it war resistance. And I think I've said before, having organized with women and feminists, and these, they are nonprofits. They're always broke though, around domestic violence or family violence. Like what they say, whatever a woman or a child needs to do, and also men are better sometimes, but it's, I believe, in smaller numbers or amounts, to defend themselves. That's not called violence. And I would just call it self-love. It's worth, you're worth staying on the planet. So are the kids. So whatever you need to do. I don't know exactly the details with Marissa Alexander. I do know she shot in the air, but she had to do some time. But still, I can't fault her. Like if she really thought something was about to go down, then you're allowed. And what you give to the individual, that belongs to the community as well. Right. So that's what I mean about the lexicon. Like this is for me, not violence. This is self-love and preservation. So I wouldn't use certain labels, but if you have a lexicon, I'll use yours, right? When I'm listening to your platform. And the last thing I want to say, I'm going back to the mother. I think that's what I was at when we last spoke. Georgia Bia Jackson, like the title of the book comes from the mother after she's burying the man-child, right? The 17-year-old Jonathan. And I just think as a people, we have such a range of emotional register. It's stunning. There's the beauty and I was listening to the music that you had up, I don't know what it's called because I don't go anywhere, but it's called something. It's
Go.
Thank you. So from our pleasure, as you've said, we have the right to pleasure, but also the profound pain, of being hunted and tortured and disappeared like over centuries. So I would just hope that this expansive register, which people who are not us probably can't clearly see, that becomes part of the analytics and part of the lexicon.
I like that. I would like to see us as a platform try to organize a sort of collective lexicon and understanding around language. I really appreciate that, especially because as we were reading this last section and George's reference to organized violence, it kind of reminded me that once upon a time, I did want to reclaim, almost in a disagreement with Malcolm and his argument about self-defense is not violence. I wanted to reclaim our ability to use the word and say that violence is not in and of itself negative. If it's organized in defense of the people, it's a positive and necessary. But I like, anyway, but to your point, I like that we should get sort of a working set of definitions. Again, I ended up thinking a lot about Kalanji and Daruba's discussion of what radical means over the last couple of days. So I think I would like to see us do that. And then for me, I'll just end with what I sent in the private chat because it was also sort of a reminder. But I wanted to say that to Dr. James, and I'll say this to others, I've been struggling with my answers to these questions, which I think have been fantastic. But I want to encourage you, Dr. James, and others to continue to push me and us on these questions, and after the fact, offer private or public criticism of our responses. And I'd like to keep this kind of energy going. I've really, to me, it's been almost a better application of George's work than I would have thought possible in this, at least in this space right here. So I really appreciate you, Dr. James, and Kalanji for it. I want and more. So anyway, thanks.
No, I second that. But don't push me because I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. Yeah. But
thank you both for that.
No, but I think yeah, I'm grateful, and we appreciate it's good to have all of us on today. GIU definitely support Guerrilla Intellectual University. I think that soon it'll be time to come with that merch we was talking about. I don't know if y'all ready for that yet. I don't know if we want to make that public. We might rock it for a while and then.
I mean, let me at least get mine. I don't want to,
Let me get mine. Y'all can do what y'all want to do after that, right?
That's what I said. Yeah.
But and shout out to to all the folks in the chat. I see some folks asking how much personal armor you got, and some folks asking about what you're willing to do and all that. This is YouTube, fam. You know what I'm saying? I hear you talking about, we ain't nothing to hide and all that. Again, that sounds statish to me. And I don't, I'm not telling the state whatever they know is what they know, and what they don't know, they won't know. I'm not one to brag on what I do, how I get down. That's very personal. You know what I'm saying? As long as you're on the right side of the barricade, stay there, and it's all good. You don't, political education will teach you that you're not asking anyone about. I remember being at a meeting one time, and someone asked me, what type of weapons did you have when you was at such and such? I'm like, what are you talking about? I have no weapons. What kind of nonsense is that? So salute to you all who mean well. Political education is key. That's all I'm going to say. Don't be asking me about what I carry. As long as you ain't got to feel it.
Look, again, this is my point, and I want to keep working with this. Again, I'm happy to be checked on this. There's nothing in this book that describes in detail how George would specifically carry out each step. So the idea that we would come on here on YouTube, even if we had that answer, and share it, to me suggests, as you said, it's a status. I'm always suspicious of those kinds of public, why would we? That's beside the point. The whole point of the analogy for me is we are the blood, and we are the public framework of an argument. How it gets put together, we all got to carry this into our own spaces and build this work. So all that, I haven't even been in the chat, admittedly.
I hopped in. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
But that kind of talk is inappropriate, and I think disrespects the conversation we've been having here this morning. So,
right. And there was someone earlier, and I'm just saying this, and I'm not, I'm on my petty J right now.
All right.
I don't, you should not assume that because you see someone on a screen that you know and understand that person fully. I know a lot of folks who come out of the academy who are thorough, and then I know some folks who come out the street that are lame, and all they do is they shout out where they come from. You know what I mean? So let's not get it twisted. You know what I mean? Let's enjoy what we're doing. Let's study together. Let's train together. You know what I'm saying? If we are on the same team, and let's move as a force. Sometimes we get confused and we get carried away talking about things that have nothing to do with nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like, be easy. That's all I have to say. Sorry about that, good people. I know,
it's
in the zone sometimes.
No, it's all good. That's
relax, brethren.
But listen, so we will be continuing next week with more GIU and George.
Yes, thank you all.
Is it just one more part, I believe? Just one more
I think we got one more part. Dr. James, will you be joining us next week to
Yeah, I look forward to joining you with another session of political theorizing and mutual respect and shared blood.
Okay.
Right on. Can't think of a better way to end it. Peace if you're willing to, that's it. Peace if you're willing to fight for it, like Fred Hampton used to say. And we will see you next week with more George and Blood in My Eye. Thanks to everybody. Catch you next time. Stay tuned. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, all that stuff. And don't miss all the stuff coming up here on BPM and GIU. Peace, everybody. Thanks again.